Get cool stuff for what you were going to do anyway. Drink beer. With Buy Beer, Get Gear from Labatt, you can just snap a photo of your receipt and upload it to the website to rack up points for exclusive merch. Get points for every purchase, whether you're grabbing a pint on draft, a case for a party, or a tall boy at the stadium. Any size, any product, anywhere you buy Labatt. Buy beer, get gear. Sign up now at rewards.labattusa.com.
This is entertainment. People pay to watch this.
Pass to a cutting hill. He darts in.
People actually subscribe.
All across central New York.
Time expired! Syracuse has done it!
It's Drive Time with your host, Tim Leonard.
Hey, guess what? I'm getting one. Hey!
We welcome you into a Monday Drive Time. Hope everyone's having a nice extended weekend. A little bit of a holiday show for you here and lots to discuss. Way more than I thought we would have to discuss today. It was a bye week, but that doesn't matter. We've got a ton to get into on the program today. Fran Brown asked today about, hey, Fran, do you have a message to the fan base? Everyone's all worried about you maybe going to Penn State after they fired James Franklin over the weekend, and it seems that the message to the fan base has only riled up the fan base more. I'm not really sure why that's the case, but we can get into that. We'll play back the comments from Fran Brown's weekly press conference when he was asked that question, how he answered it. Some of you are really upset in our social media comments on QSportsTalk.com about the way Fran Brown handled that question earlier today. We will get into this Penn State news, what it means for Syracuse. What are the chances that Penn State will go after Fran Brown after the Nittany Lions? What a fall from grace. They were a top 5 team about 15 or 16 days ago. They were undefeated. They were a national title favorite going into the season, and they lost to Oregon close in overtime. They lost to UCLA as 25-point favorites on the road, and they lost to Northwestern at home as a 20-point favorite. Their quarterback is out for the year, and they have fired James Franklin, swallowing a $45 million buyout because that's just kind of commonplace now across college football. And amazing to see that in just 3 weeks, Penn State is now without a coach. They have an interim coach for the rest of the season, but they will be looking for a new head coach. And that has major ripples to Syracuse. There's a lot to get into in regards to this because, yes, Fran Brown is a name that has come up. And, yes, Fran Brown is someone that probably will be looked at by Penn State, considering that Pat Kraft, the athletic director at Penn State, was also the athletic director at Temple when Fran Brown was an assistant coach at Temple under Matt Rule, who we will get into. And, of course, that has been a name that has come to the forefront here with this Penn State coaching search, where Matt Rule is someone that seems like he has a very close relationship with Pat Kraft. We know that. Seems like he loves Penn State, and we'll get into how Matt Rule handled his question when he was speaking at the Nebraska press conference today about the idea of the rumors of him going back to Penn State. So plenty to get into on the show today. We see the phone lines are already ringing here, and we will get to all of your thoughts. Phone lines are open throughout the show at 315-437-7644. Again, that's 4 ESPN 44. But let's begin with our Burdick BMW of Cicero opening drive, and let's actually try and answer this question of what are the chances that Penn State will go after Fran Brown? Or what are the chances that A, Penn State would offer Fran Brown, and B, Fran Brown would leave for a potential offer from Penn State? I said on Orange Nation, we played kind of a gimmicky, fun game last week where we called it Pick a Percent. And we all had to answer the question of what is the percentage chance that Fran Brown will be back at Syracuse next season. I said last week 90% that Fran Brown will be back at Syracuse next season. And I know that a lot of you have made the point that Ricky Collins struggling, the team falling off, not trending up as much as they were a couple weeks ago. I've heard it mentioned that that might be a blessing in disguise, that Syracuse now is not as trendy of a school, is not as trendy of a name for Fran Brown in this coaching cycle, which is going to be a wild coaching carousel. It's already 8 schools open, and heck, Florida State might be opening. Florida, we think, will open. There's a lot of schools that could be added. It doesn't look like Bill Belichick is long for UNC, although they made some comments against that today. NC State might open in the ACC if things keep trending that way. There could be 5 or 6 jobs open in the ACC alone, the way this thing is trending. But I said last week, 90% chance in my eyes that Fran Brown will return to Syracuse next season. Off of the Penn State news, I would lower the percentage to 80%. It's not a major concern for me that Penn State is going to come calling for Fran Brown. And the way I would phrase this is I have consumed everything there is to consume, every college football podcast, read every article, listened to every insider over the last 24 hours. I have yet to find a single insider or anyone that follows this closely that is in the know that would put Fran Brown in a top 5 short list right now for this Penn State job. Fran Brown is probably a top 15 candidate for the Penn State job, and he should be. And I think he will likely get an interview, and maybe he will accept that interview. And Pat Kraft is someone that knows him. And what we know about Fran Brown is if he was coaching at Temple when Pat Kraft was the AD, Fran Brown probably made an impression on him. He's made an impression on pretty much everyone that he has come across at Syracuse. So my feeling on this is it's not as if Fran's chances of returning to Syracuse took a major hit with this Penn State news. Now, I do think it's worth talking about. Fran Brown 5 years ago, if you would have asked him what's one of your dream jobs, I don't think, and we can't say for sure because we didn't know Fran Brown 5 years ago, but I don't think it's crazy to say he probably would have brought up Penn State, given New Jersey, given the ties there. But like I said, no one right now that I have seen has him as a top 5 candidate. The top candidate is Matt Rule. The second name that you see is Curt Cignetti. Those are going to likely be the first 2 calls here for this Penn State opening. And my educated guess right now is Matt Rule is probably going to be the next head coach at Penn State. So actually, when you play the game of how likely is it that Fran Brown comes back next year? How likely is it that Jeff Nixon returns next year? How likely is it that Elijah Robinson returns next year? We answered those questions on our gimmicky game on Orange Nation last week as well. And I believe I said 55% that Jeff Nixon would return. That's the one to me that now is probably in the neighborhood of 25 or 30% for me. That's the one that has taken the biggest hit with this Penn State news. Because Matt Rule going to Penn State feels like the most likely outcome. If you had to pick one coach right now to go to Penn State and take over that job, my money, my gut, my feel is that Matt Rule will be the guy because of his ties there. In fact, let's give you a little bit of what Ty Hildenbrand had to say on the Solid Verbal podcast. If you listen to Orange Nation, we've had Ty on in the past couple weeks. Ty is a guy that is very close ties to the Penn State program. He's a fan of Penn State. He hosts this national college football podcast, so he knows what's going on around Penn State about as good as anyone. We also know, if you've been listening to him when he pops on our segments on Orange Nation, that he is a huge fan of Fran Brown. So we'll get to his thoughts on Fran Brown potentially being the next head coach at Penn State. But first, here's what Ty Hildenbrand of the Solid Verbal podcast had to say about the idea of Penn State now being an open coaching job and who are the names that come to top of mind for him.
I've been saying on this show for at least 5 years that Matt Rule is going to be the next coach at Penn State. Matt Rule is from State College. He played at State College High. He was a linebacker. He walked on to the Penn State football team. He played for Joe Paterno back in the day.
Yes.
This is seen as one of their own. I would personally be stunned if it's not Matt Rule. I have been in that camp for a while. I'm not saying it's the best decision, but I think that will ultimately end up being the move.
So another example of someone that knows what's going on here, and they're saying Matt Rule. Pete Nakos is going to join us on Orange Nation tomorrow. He's been keeping a close eye on all of the coaching carousel news. He said in a tweet earlier today that Matt Rule has emerged as the favorite here in this job. Now, Ty and his co-host Dan Rubenstein then get to talking about Fran Brown. And I want to preface this by again saying that no one out there, and we'll get to your phone calls. I appreciate Nick Wade, and we'll get to all of your thoughts on this situation in just a little bit. But I want to set the table here and make it known what my feelings are and what others are saying about this so that we are all clear on the likelihood of Fran Brown being the next head coach at Penn State. Ty Hildenbrand is going to bring up Fran Brown's name here when I play back this bite for you, and he has gone on the record and said, that's the guy that I want as a Penn State guy and a national college football podcast host. But the reason I'm playing this is because it's kind of the closest thing we've seen to anyone saying Fran Brown to Penn State. Fran Brown has been brought up on articles where they list 15 coaches that could be the next head coach at Penn State or who could get a look. But right now, it does not feel like he is in a top 5, top 7, top 8 position. Maybe on the outskirts of the top 5. But in order for Fran Brown to get a look, it feels like Matt Rule would have to say no. Kurt Cignetti would have to say no. Manny Diaz would have to say no. Maybe Campbell at Iowa State says no. There's plenty of other coaches. This is going to be a highly sought-after job and one of the biggest jobs in this cycle. But here's what Ty Hildenbrand had to say about why he wants Fran Brown to be the next head coach of his Nittany Lions.
Outside of Matt Rule, some other names that I will posit, not necessarily ones that I have read. I think Fran Brown is interesting at Syracuse.
A lot of energy, younger guy, recruiting, I think he has a 5-star receiver committed at the moment from South Florida. Continue.
I would be surprised if they went Fran Brown over Matt Rule, but alas, and also doesn't seem like Fran Brown wants to leave. Money talks, Penn State's a bigger job, but that's the guy that I am most excited about. I have not seen that reported anywhere. This is just me speculating.
So again, not reported really anywhere. Speculation in just one Penn State follower and college football podcast host, Ty Hildenbrand and Dan Rubenstein there of the Solid Verbal, that are big fans of Fran Brown, and they're putting it out there that they want Fran Brown. But even on that same podcast, Ty Hildenbrand said he would be stunned if it's not Matt Rule. It feels like that is the most likely option, and therefore I am more worried about, would Jeff Nixon then follow Matt Rule to Penn State? And is that the job that Jeff Nixon takes? And we know that there is going to be some interest in the Orange's offensive coordinator this offseason because of what he is doing. So those are my thoughts on it in our Burdick BMW of Cicero opening drive. Let's get to your thoughts, and let's start with Nick, who is in Las Vegas. Nick, what are your thoughts on the situation?
Tim, how you doing, buddy? Thanks for letting me on the show. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for being patient there. Sorry, I had to ramble and get to my thoughts.
No worries. I got a few things I want to touch base on with you regarding. First of all, the press conference today. What concerned me was Fran was much more adamant about who the starting quarterback was over his commitment to staying at Syracuse. I feel like that was more of a deflection than an adamant answer, which was kind of disheartening in a way, but take it for what it's worth. I feel he could have given it a little bit more enthusiasm and more structure as to why he's going to stay at Syracuse. Just personal opinion. Second of all, I was doing some research online. According to Covers.com, Manny Diaz is the favorite to get the job at plus 150. And the only two people ahead of Fran, other than Diaz, are Alex Golish and John Gruden. Fran is fourth at plus 325.
So let me just say, Nick, and I know you're in Las Vegas, so I'm guessing you've got odds and you know where to look for odds and stuff like that. I've seen that same list. I'll just say this. I don't know if that's I haven't seen it on an actual sports book, and maybe you have, and you can correct me. That list to me does not feel like the odds makers are doing a good job with how that list is. That's one tweet I've seen from an account that I don't think is incredibly credible, obviously. And based on everything I've read, and again, I've consumed all that there is to consume on this, I feel like in the last 24 hours, you can't put John Gruden ahead of Matt Rule. I mean, John Gruden's not going to be the next head coach at Penn State. Alex Golish's name is not. So the way that list is broken down, I understand that it's out there and it's probably true that you can bet on that, but I'm not taking that to mean much just because I don't think that list is very accurate as to what the odds should be.
I agree with you that Matt Rule should be the favorite, and I think he is the favorite. I also think Manny Diaz is a good shot, and Cignetti, obviously, and my sleeper is Brian Hartline from Ohio State. I think he would do a great job. He's a great recruiter, and he's somebody young and upcoming. I think that's a good option for them as well. I don't see Fran taking the job personally or being offered the job, but I feel like he could have done a better job answering the question rather than deflecting it earlier today. But what I do think is a plus for Syracuse, I think there's 3 key recruits that we can go after, and I think we have a good shot at getting all 3 of them.
Yeah.
Terry Wiggins, Tavion Branch, and Julian Peterson, 2 kids from New Jersey, 1 kid from Pennsylvania. Syracuse was high on all 3 of them, all class of 26 guys. I think they would be good flips, and I think there's a good chance of getting at least one of the 3.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Nick, and I appreciate you checking in. That's Nick in Las Vegas. That's another ripple effect from this whole thing is, keep in mind, too, Syracuse plays Penn State in 2 years. They have a home-and-home in 2027 and 2028 against the Nittany Lions. So the idea of Fran Brown going, that would be all-time drama if Syracuse is coaching against Fran Brown in 2 years' time, and that's how they open their season. And it's still very important just how good is Penn State as a football program, and what does that mean for Syracuse? How much is Syracuse competitive in recruiting battles with Penn State? And that's a whole nother layer to this situation here that we can get into. So all good points from Nick in Las Vegas. I do want to circle back when we get some time to what he had to say about Fran's comment and how I can tell that it's concerned a lot of you out there, and I can see it in our Twitter replies and everything, that it felt like a non-committal response from Fran Brown. We will get to that as the show continues. Let's keep the phone calls coming, though. Let's check in with our good friend Mark in New York City, who I will say, Mark, you were on this. You did call in a couple weeks ago and say, what do you think the chances are that Fran Brown could be brought up as the Penn State job? And I don't think I laughed in your face, but I understand why you're calling back today. And we can hash it out more. I appreciate you checking in.
No, I appreciate that, Tim, and it definitely wasn't a laugh in the face, but I did feel like you kind of brushed off that comment, and
Sure.
I kind of saw this coming. You know, I did see this coming. You know, Fran's obviously a Northeast guy. He's always said he wants to be in the Northeast, and, you know, Penn State is probably the top job in the Northeast. But, you know, I know you just mentioned that you've kind of gone through every podcast and mentioned everything that possibly can be connected, but I think there's one key piece, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but, you know, I know you mentioned there's some tie with the athletic director, Patrick Kraft, at Penn State and Fran Brown, but if I'm lining up this timeline correctly, Fran Brown interviewed for the Temple head coach job in 2018 when Pat Kraft was the athletic director at Temple. And I'm saying a quote right now from that Adam and Brenneman podcast where Fran Brown said, and I quote Fran Brown, "Temple didn't want to give me a job. They said I wasn't a good enough coach. I didn't have good enough experience. I cried when I didn't get the job." So if this lines up when the Temple AD...
That was definitely Pat Kraft, yep.
So, you know, I think there's some bad blood here, and I think we can't lose sight of the fact that, you know, Fran's a loyal guy, and, you know, if they have a bad history, you know, that obviously works in our favor for keeping Fran in Syracuse. So, you know, I don't know if that's directly correlated, but, you know, kind of it all lines up, and I think that's a good thing to just kind of pinpoint there.
No, it's definitely good research on your end, and it's noteworthy for sure, and I appreciate you checking in, Mark. I think you could also flip it around and say Pat Kraft was interested in Fran Brown in 2018, and now look what Fran Brown has become, and he's seen Fran Brown and had a close eye on him going back to the Temple days and knew what Fran Brown could be then, and now maybe given that Fran has sort of backed it up more and has some head coaching experience, he will look more fondly on Fran Brown this time around. But certainly that's noteworthy. I mean, that was 100% Pat Kraft who interviewed Fran Brown. If that is all true and Fran Brown isn't lying about getting interviewed and how he felt about the situation, that was the same athletic director who is now the AD at Penn State and who is clearly very good friends with Penn State alum Matt Rule. And apparently they vacationed together. So, again, Matt Rule is the name that is at the top of the list here. Matt Rule is probably going to get an offer, would be my guess. I think we can also get into the conversation of, if you're Matt Rule, do you go to Penn State right now, considering Nebraska is a program that also has potential to be one of the best programs in college football? And Manny Diaz, who was also asked today, the Duke football head coach, about what are the chances or what do you make of your name being brought up in the Penn State rumors, Manny Diaz used Indiana as an example of how college football is changing. And what Curt Cignetti has been able to do at Indiana, I know the perception among a lot of longtime college football fans right now is, oh, if you're the head coach at Indiana and Penn State comes calling, Curt Cignetti is going to think long and hard about that job. And I'm not saying Curt Cignetti is not going to do that, but Indiana's got a ton of money. And this is not 2018. This is not 2020. This is Indiana in 2025, which could be a 12-0 football team. I saw something today. They have a 53% chance of winning out in the regular season. Indiana is legitimately one of the favorites to win the national title right now after what they did to Oregon. And they've got all kinds of money. So that's our long opening drive brought to you by Burdick BMW of Cicero. Lots to get to today, fresh off a bye week. We can also talk about Pittsburgh at some point and what they did this week and give an early preview of the game against Pitt. Also get into some of Fran Brown's comments from his press conference today that did not have anything to do with what we've been talking about for 20 minutes, which is the Penn State job and the chances of Fran Brown leaving for said job. He did make a impassioned case for Ricky Collins is still the quarterback, and we'll get to my thoughts on that as well. But I do want to talk about Fran Brown's comment that is going viral right now and that everyone is a little bit upset over, how he handled the question today of what do you have to say to the fan base right now that is worried that you will leave for a bigger job. We will get to that on the other side. You're listening to Drive Time on ESPN Radio or watching it on QSportsTalk.com.
Auburn Community.
All right, what's up, chat? Yeah, Penn State's got a lot of money. That's fair. Philly's most wanted might reset the clock a little bit. I also think, like in any industry, a lot of people just leave for more money. And Penn State's offensive coordinator position is definitely going to have a bigger paycheck and more dollars next to it than Syracuse. That's just kind of the reality. I don't really think Matt Rule would be an awesome hire or a home run hire either, Phil, but that seems to be a guy that's definitely going to get a long look. Yeah, Adidas, I saw the rumors that they paid the buyout. Friend, yeah, he did work for Rule. He's in the Matt Rule coaching tree. Yeah, Kev, I know you're joking. Like, would Tim say he's looking to go to Fox Sports when he is getting paid from Galaxy? That's what I'm going to say when we get back. Like, right or wrong, I mean, you don't want to ever give up leverage in any sort of situation. So I know that a lot of you are disappointed by Fran's comment, but if Fran Brown has an agent telling him what to say, he's not going to tell him, like, he doesn't want him to keep saying, I'm here for life. Like, he wants, the agent wants to make money. Fran wants to make money. Anyone that is doing any job wants to maximize the value they have and how much money they can make in said job. And if they're not doing that, then they're probably not being smart. And if Fran did leave, yeah, the receipts would come out and he would get, it would be an all-week thing or an all-month thing amongst the Syracuse fans. I mean, it would be a pretty big turncoat move considering how much he went out of his way to say, I'm not the guy that leaves and is just trying to use this as a springboard job. I think it was like brought up that Adidas paid the buyout. Then people have disputed it, so... Yeah, Clark Lee, I think, is another name, Gio. Cignetti would be I think that's the one that the Penn State fans would want the most. That would be the big swing. Like, if you could get him, I mean, that's how everyone feels right now about if you could get Curt Cignetti. Yeah, Will Nixon's out of eligibility. I will say Jeff Nixon's daughter is on the soccer team, and I think she's still an underclassman. Also, it's not as if this is, how should I say this? Like, State College is not a major upgrade, and it's not like USC is humming and coming for Jeff Nixon. Like, if I know that the Ohio State defensive coordinator left to go to Penn State, but State College isn't some destination. They're going to have to just do it. If you're making the decision to go from Syracuse to Penn State, it's probably money-based if you're Jeff Nixon. And it's a bigger brand and all that. And maybe he's really tight with Matt Rule, and if Matt Rule's the guy, I mean, it seems like he's tight with Matt Rule. Mark, if it was 4 to 6, you could call in twice. We could have one each hour.
Shows on QSportsTalk.com.
Welcome back to Drive Time. Tim Leonard with you until the top of the hour. Talking all things Fran Brown, of course. Another football game week, but big topic today is, will Fran Brown be the head coach next year at Syracuse? Will Penn State be coming for Fran Brown? And all of you are all riled up over Fran Brown's comments earlier today during his press conference. We'll get to that if you missed it. Fran Brown not exactly addressing the question of, are you here for life? Are you going to be at Syracuse for the long term? A little bit of a different answer than his opening press conference, but kind of to be expected. I'll get into my thoughts on that. Let's first give you the comments if you missed it earlier today. Fran Brown in the middle of his weekly Monday press conference, which we always air for you on Orange Nation. You can always watch it as it happens on QSportsTalk.com. He was asked by a reporter, Javon Edmonds of Syracuse.com, Fran, do you have a message right now to the fan base that is worried about you leaving for a bigger job?
I mean, I'm working at Syracuse right now, so I don't really need to talk about that. If this wasn't where I wanted to be at right at the moment, would I be standing here at this moment? Nope. Yeah, so I'm just focused on that. I'm focused on being here. I'm locked in on coaching the players that I have here. This is where I work at. I think that's disrespectful to even bring that up and ask that. Like, what's the point asking that? To make some media or me to say something opposite of it. Like, they hired me to come here and do a job to coach this team, and that's what I'm doing.
So, a lot of you have had the reaction to this, and we just heard from Nick in Las Vegas, and it's all over our Twitter and social media comments right now, that was a concerning response. That was a concerning way for Fran Brown to handle that question. And it felt like a non-answer. It felt like he was deflecting. That was not the guy that we heard in his opening press conference when, of course, Fran Brown, we all know, went out of his way to say, I'm here for life. I'm going to work for 10 years, and I'm going to retire with my daughter, and all the comments that he made. I would say this, before you freak out, I would challenge you, one, what coach out there has ever answered a question? And a lot of coaches around the country today are being asked that very question. We can get into Matt Rule's response to it, which I thought Matt Rule handled the question well, but he also gave a non-answer. And we talked about a couple weeks ago when SMU was on the schedule, and there was a lot of chatter about Rhett Lashley being brought up at his alma mater, Arkansas. There was a lot of responses from the SMU fans that they didn't like the answer from Rhett Lashley. It is commonplace for a college coach to get asked that uncomfortable question in the middle of a season when his name is brought up in circulation with other jobs, and almost 99% of the time, the reaction among fans is, oh no, he's gone. Oh no, this is not the answer we were looking for. Well, of course it's not the answer you were looking for. No one in any job, in any industry, should get up there and definitively say basically what Fran said in his opening press conference, which is, I am here for life. I have no interest in going anywhere else. Because if you're in any job, it's smart to keep any leverage you have. And it's smart to maximize your value in said job. Can you honestly say right now, if you're driving around, if you're listening, however you're consuming this show, if it's after the fact, that you would honestly be in whatever career you're in, whatever job you're in, and you would say, I don't want to maximize my value. I don't want to keep as much leverage as possible. I know plenty of you listening have been in negotiations for getting a promotion at your job or something that you can make a comparison to. And if Fran Brown has a good agent, which we're assuming he does, a good agent would tell Fran Brown, hey, you're doing really well at Syracuse. You're going to start getting asked these questions. Here's how you should handle it. Because a good agent wants to make more money, and Fran Brown wants to make more money as well because he's just a human and he's just an American. And that's the reality of it. So to go crazy or be up in arms over the situation, I get it felt like a different tone from what Fran Brown gave you in his opening press conference. But any agent, anyone that would coach anyone on that situation would tell Fran Brown, let's keep the leverage we have. Let's try and maximize our value. And Fran Brown's a really smart guy, and he wants to maximize his value too. And also, that's just every response that any coach has ever given to that question. It's always a non-answer that feels like it's not the answer that you want. And if you went into that and you were fearful that Fran Brown was going to leave, it feels like that's the exact answer that gives you more of a backing and more of a belief that he is going to leave. But really, it's just a non-answer that we don't need to overanalyze, and we don't need to take every little word and try and identify, oh, he said right now instead of saying in the future, or put a fine-tooth comb to it. Fran Brown handled that question like every single coach in America handles that question. Let's hear what Matt Rule had to say earlier today. And this was a long response. And I thought Matt Rule handled it well. When he was asked, the Nebraska head coach, who is at the top right now and is the guy that I would say is the educated guess right now to be the next head coach at Penn State. Here's Nebraska head coach Matt Rule when he was asked about the Penn State rumors earlier today at his press conference.
I love Penn State. Met my wife there. It's my alma mater. Fan since I was born. I think probably had a Penn State shirt when I was born. I love Pat Kraft. Really sad to see Coach Franklin go. Troy and I are in unbelievable relationship too. And Troy and I are in constant communication about this program and where we're headed. You know, I came here for two reasons. I love the community here and wanted to live here, and I love it here. And I wanted to rebuild Nebraska football. And, you know, Troy and I understand the steps that you need to take to make us Big Ten champions and national champions. This place is elite. And I want to be a great father, and I want to be a great college football coach. And so, you know, I'm not going to talk a lot about job openings when they come. Maybe it's been a while here, but this is what happens when you win. I've dealt with it. You know, we've won at Temple, and I dealt with it all the time. I've dealt with Baylor. I'm not going to talk about those things ever. I'm not going to talk about my contract here. I'm going to talk about the team. But, yeah, I absolutely love it here. And I want us to continue to take the steps needed for us to turn this thing into a beast.
So, again, kind of a non-answer there from Matt Rule. Now, I thought he handled it very well. It was a genuine answer. And he did not shy away from the fact that, yes, it's an obvious question that should be asked right now. And, yes, I do love Penn State. And I cut some of it out. He went into kind of a long recap of how much James Franklin has meant to the program and how much he feels for James Franklin and why he feels like there's a problem right now with coaches being painted as villains. Let's get to more of your phone calls as we continue this conversation of what are the chances of Fran Brown leaving for Penn State? What are the chances Penn State would be interested in Fran Brown? What are the ripple effects of the Penn State job opening up and James Franklin being fired this weekend? Let's go to Michael, who is in Manlius. What's up, Michael?
Hey, not much, Tim. How you doing?
I'm doing well, man.
All right. My opinion is that he'll stay because he's a man of scruples, not scratch. That Dart stuff is for real, Tim.
Yeah.
He really means it. So, I believe in my heart that he loves this town, the city, and I think it would. He'd never do something if it wasn't from his heart, and I think he loves the city. So, and he genuinely loves it, not just saying that. He genuinely loves it. So I'd say he stays. And I'm going to say the same word of the week again, relentless.
I like it. Okay. Well, I appreciate you checking in, Michael. He's always given us one of the Dart words of the week. That's one of our weekly callers, Michael and Manlius. And I do think that the select group of people right now that is upset with the Fran Brown comment, I think those people deep down believed that everything that Fran Brown said in his opening press conference and everything that he went out of his way to say truly is something that Fran Brown stood by. And to this point, Fran Brown has been a man of his word. And our favorite thing about Fran Brown is he is a genuine guy and he's honest, and whatever he says has come true. Really, for the most part, since he has taken this job. I was never in the camp that I took that as 100% gospel that Fran Brown was truly going to be here for life. I thought it was good to hear, and I think Fran Brown is a different dude, and he's not like other coaches that Syracuse have had here for obvious reasons. But I guess for me, I did not have a visceral reaction today to Fran Brown making that sort of non-answer, non-comment to the question about what is your message to the fan base right now that is worried that you would take a bigger job. I never felt like Fran was going to get up there and double down and say, I'm here for life again. That just doesn't really make any sense if you're Fran Brown to say that. And maybe it's because I never was in the camp. Like, I'm sure there is a portion of the fan base that feels that it was a non-starter, that he was ever going to go anywhere because he has told us explicitly that he is here for life. And even when we play back the comments from Ty Hildenbrand of the Solid Verbal podcast earlier, he said, Fran Brown's the guy I want to come to Penn State as a Penn State guy, but who knows if he would be interested in Penn State. Obviously, if you're Fran Brown, it's understandable to think that there will be some interest there. It goes against what he said in his opening press conference, but maybe I was just never one of those people. I just always felt it was a little naive to take that opening press conference and assume that that is exactly how Fran Brown is going to feel for the rest of time. That's just kind of what you hear at opening press conferences. Now, Fran was a little bit more emphatic than the typical opening press conference about it, and he did go out of his way to say, I'm not like other guys, and it will come back and fly right in his face if he does leave for a different job. And as I said at the start of the show, last week I was 90% Fran Brown is coming back to Syracuse next year. Penn State news, maybe it's dropped to about 80%. I still think Fran Brown is going to be the head coach at Syracuse next year. I don't think Penn State is going to offer Fran Brown to be the next head coach at Penn State. My opinion hasn't really changed that much on the situation. I think what we're not talking about enough is the chances that Matt Rule, the obvious hire, comes through, and then he looks at his old buddy and his old Baylor offensive coordinator and a guy that followed him to the Carolina Panthers in Jeff Nixon, who was definitely due for a bigger job and a pay increase and would definitely be getting that if he went to Penn State. We talked about it on Orange Nation earlier, and I don't 100% disagree with Steve, but he was saying that it's almost a little bit like apples to apples if Jeff Nixon is going from offensive coordinator at Syracuse to offensive coordinator at Penn State. And I do think going into the season, our belief was Jeff Nixon is looking for a head coaching job, and he's looking for the right next job. Having said that, I think Penn State is a much better job for money reasons mostly than Syracuse. Penn State offensive coordinator position is going to pay Jeff Nixon more than the Syracuse offensive coordinator position. And if you're Jeff Nixon and if you're Jeff Nixon's agent, it makes perfect sense to be having that conversation and to be looking into that. So if it does come to that, and that would require probably Matt Rule being the guy, and then his name will be popped up maybe more closely to following Matt Rule, considering the ties there. We'll hit another timeout. Plenty to get to on the show today. Phone lines are still open for the final 20 minutes or so of the show, 315-437-7644. How did you take in Fran Brown's comments today? Are you upset with how he handled that question? Do you disagree with what I'm saying? Do you think there's a chance he's going to Penn State? We welcome your phone calls as we continue here on Drive Time on ESPN Radio and QSportsTalk.com.
This is our...
Oh, boy, we're way behind. I'm making it into a 2-hour show. Yeah, I think also Nebraska is a big-time job. And they've got lots of money. And, I mean, everyone's making the comparison right now that Penn State has to get this hire right because they don't want to become Nebraska. Because when Nebraska missed on a couple hires, then they've really fallen off. But Nebraska also was humming at one point because they do have a lot of resources, and that's a place that you can win for sure. I think they will definitely be calling Kurt Cignetti, Ryan. Yeah, and there's a lot of schools bowling ball that can't compete with the Penn State money. And I think that's why Penn State made the move is, if you've really been following, they have put huge amounts of money into their program. Whether it's assistant coaches, whether it's Franklin getting paid like $8-9 million, the facilities, the stadium renovations. Obviously, the Big Ten is also getting some private equity money down the road, it seems like. The Big Ten just is in a different class than the ACC. Yeah, I'll just go until 7 tonight and see if they kick me off. Yeah, Kyle in the YouTube chat saying Fran's agent is Jimmy Sexton, the best agent in college football. I'm sure he's guided him to retain his leverage. Yep, no doubt. Which will shut down, yeah. Gio at some point will just be like, I'm not getting paid for that. I'm out of here. I saw that, Michaela Walker. I was surprised. Remember they brought it up last year, like general manager coming, and then there wasn't much news about it. So it seems she didn't have much of a say on this year's roster, but kind of like Alex Klein hired for next year, sort of. But good to see that everyone needs a general manager right now. So good to see that they have hired someone. And I thought Syracuse, I guess they weren't behind the curve on the general manager for basketball, but I did feel like they aren't behind the curve for sure with women's hoops now. There's not as many general managers at the women's level, so it's good to see them just get into that, and that's going to become a bigger and bigger thing. Everyone will have a GM for women's hoops, basketball, of course, football, and the GM role will only become more valuable and more money probably in the next 3, 5, 10 years too. Oh, that's cool, Ryan. I like that they're doing that. Yeah, as much as you can give them credit right now without seeing the guys play, Philly's most wanted, but it clearly made a difference from what we know. I mean, they seemed way more prepared for the portal. And he's a guy that just seeing him work a little bit, he is constantly watching film and really it's a hard job. I mean, it takes a lot of time, and I think he is very good at it.
NewSportsTalk.com and ESPN Radio Syracuse.
Welcome back into Drive Time. Man, we're behind. Bad clock management from me today. Monday off a bye week, and there's been tons to discuss. After Fran Brown's comments earlier today, have the fan base all riled up and annoyed and felt like a non-answer, they say. I've gone over that. I think that's kind of the answer that you get from every head coach when they're asked about other jobs, and wouldn't read too much into that. If you missed the start of the show, I have said I don't think Fran Brown is a top 5 candidate right now for Penn State, but he's probably a top 15, top 10 candidate. He does have a relationship with their athletic director, Pat Kraft. Mark in New York City called in, brought up some good points that Pat Kraft did not give him the Temple job when he interviewed for it at one point. Now, will Fran Brown get an interview from Pat Kraft again that Penn State is open? Maybe, probably. Will there be real interest there? I don't know. But as I said, Fran Brown, I think, is still going to be the head coach at Syracuse next year. My opinion on that has not changed that dramatically. Although I do think this is on the short list of jobs that would be appealing to Fran Brown and what we know of Fran Brown, and is a job that he would succeed at given his Northeast ties. And given that Penn State is a program that has resources that are incredibly impressive, and that's goes without being said. Just look at the buyout that they had to pay for James Franklin, which was about $45 million. Now, it seems like Franklin, if he takes another job by December, which is probably likely, and that's something we're not talking about this, where will James Franklin go next? Maybe James Franklin just kicks back and says, I've got $45 million. I'll just get a cushy TV job for a year and just hang out. It's been stressful. It's been hard on my family at Penn State. I've been taking a lot of flack. I'll just hang out for a little bit. Maybe he jumps right into coaching. Maybe it's an ACC job. ACC jobs are going to be open. I mean, heck, it seems like Florida State is going to be open at the end of this year. And it's amazing how quickly things have changed on Florida State. But part of why Florida State is trending that way is because Pittsburgh went and beat them at Doak Campbell Stadium 34-31 over the weekend. And let's actually talk a little bit about the football game that is coming up. I know we've rambled all day about this head coaching news at Penn State, but I do want to talk a little bit about the game and the fact that Pittsburgh is a 10.5-point favorite over Syracuse, and this is going to be a tough game. Mason Heinschel continues to look good. 2 starts so far as a true freshman quarterback for Pitt. He was very good against Florida State, and their offense was very impressive against our old friend Tony White, who is the current defensive coordinator at Florida State. 479 total yards of offense for Pittsburgh in this win. Heinschel, 321 passing yards, 2 TDs, 2 interceptions. After he went for 4 TDs, no picks, in his first ever start against BC and a rout 48-7 win 2 weeks ago. Des Reed, who was questionable with injury all week leading up to the game, all ACC running back, one of the better skill position guys in the conference. He did play, and he was very, very good. 8 catches, 155 yards for the Pittsburgh running back, 2 receiving touchdowns, also ran it 16 times for 64 yards. The biggest thing to come out of Fran Brown's press conference that actually pertains to the game on Saturday was what he had to say when he was pressed a couple different times about the quarterback position and the chances of moving off of Ricky Collins. Chris Carlson followed up about midway through the interview, Chris Carlson of Syracuse.com, and said, will Luke Carney's redshirt status have anything to do with whether you choose to go to him as a spark, considering he is now the backup quarterback, or what Fran has deemed as probably the number 2 quarterback to this point in the season. Here's what Fran had to say about Ricky Collins when he was asked another question about Luke Carney and the quarterback position.
Ricky, our quarterback. We're sticking with Ricky. I want to make sure you understand that, Chris. Ricky Collins is our quarterback. We want to stick with Ricky. When something else happens, you'll be the first to see it if you're watching the game, if we had to put him in. But Ricky Collins is our quarterback. We want to stick with Ricky, and everyone else is going to back Ricky up until that time comes for them.
So Fran has made that very clear, as I thought he would. That's exactly how I thought he would handle that today. We said when we played that pick-a-percent game last week that it's maybe 5% that Luke Carney would start this Pittsburgh game. I think the chances of Luke Carney starting a game this season are probably more in the neighborhood of 20 to 25%. And that's given that there is a chance that Ricky Collins gets injured or something happens to Ricky Collins that you have to go to the backup quarterback. And if that's the case, then you have to keep that in consideration now that Luke Carney is truly the backup quarterback at Syracuse. But the narrative out there that Luke Carney is some Texas high school football superstar. Luke Carney, I think, is a very talented quarterback who's got a big, bright future at Syracuse. And I'm not saying this to, look down on Luke Carney at all. But he did not play Texas high school football that was featured on Friday Night Lights. I mean, he was at a prep school that, from everyone that I have talked to that follows Texas high school football closely, they were quick to point out that this is not the Texas high school football that those of you out there that have never been to Texas are imagining or have read about or have seen in movies. This is not big-time Texas high school football. So I would caution the people that are going through his stats and saying he won 4 straight high school titles at Texas. Let's keep in mind, all of you that are doing that could do the exact same exercise for Ricky Collins, and it would be actually more impressive. You could say, wow, look at his offer sheet. Look at the 4-star number next to his name. Look at his ranking. Look at LSU being the school that he went to first. Look at his numbers. Look at that he was, I think, an Elite 11 camp guy. I'm not deep in the high school football recruiting scene, but I'm deep enough to know that Luke Carney was a well-respected quarterback that comes from a small private school in Texas. And I do feel like it's become overblown what I'm seeing on Twitter, just the general conversations from the fan base right now in regards to Luke Carney. The coaches know how good Luke Carney is more than we know how good Luke Carney is right now. The coaches see him every day in practice. And I know some of you have brought up the point of, if I was Fran Brown, I would give Luke Carney equal reps in practice this week, and I would say who wins the job in practice gets the job to start against Pittsburgh. Well, the coaches have been evaluating the quarterbacks all throughout spring, fall. Ricky Collins was named the starter in the spring. He was clearly named the starter, and actually a little bit earlier than we thought was named the starter. Ricky Collins is clearly outplaying Luke Carney in practice. The question is Ricky Collins looking anything like he is in practice when he gets under the bright lights of a game? And there's reason to believe that maybe he has not translated that based on what we've heard about how he was in practice to what we are seeing on the field on Saturdays to this point from Ricky Collins. That being said, let's not go crazy and claim that we know Luke Carney is definitely better than Ricky Collins. None of us know that. Unless you've been to every single practice and unless you have seen the practice film, like maybe Jonte Cook's uncle says he's seen, then you don't really know that Luke Carney is definitely going to be better. And unless Fran Brown definitely knows that, he can't make that move, because talk about a move that you can't go back on. If you bench Ricky Collins and Luke Carney is bad, that is the worst outcome possible. And then there will be plenty of people calling into the show saying, why did he go to Luke Carney? Just the way that everyone was calling in saying Ricky Collins should be in for Steve Angeli. And now those people that were calling in are clamoring for Ricky Collins to hit the bench and Luke Carney to be the quarterback. Just trying to keep this all in perspective. We'll hit our final timeout. Have some shout-outs to hand out as we return for one final segment on Drive Time on ESPN Radio and QSportsTalk.com.
Saturday, the
Jimbo got like $75 million or something, yeah, for his buyout. I think it was 77. Crazy. Yeah, Kev, I think there's something to be said for his ranking would probably be higher if he went to a big school, but also would his stats be as good? I mean, I find it sort of funny that a lot of people are now like experts on Luke Carney, when I'm sure if you did the same exercise going into the season, none of you would have thought Luke Carney would have been better than Ricky Collins based on high school stats or pedigree. Now everyone is making the assumption that he is better because Ricky Collins has struggled, but Ricky Collins struggling is also kind of in a way proof at how tough it is to be a quarterback at the Power 4 level and how much there are growing pains and how much it takes time. And Luke Carney is a true freshman. I just go back to like the coaches see him every day at practice, and nothing that Fran Brown has said has implied that Luke Carney is close to taking that job or that they're moving off Ricky Collins. Now, the conversation that I had Monday, I think last Monday, and we were taking callers on, I think it's still a conversation, is at what point do you lose the locker room? At what point does if Ricky's struggles continue, like if it is halftime against Pittsburgh and they aren't moving the ball at all and Pittsburgh is running up the score and it's another like 24-3 game at the half, the Boo Birds are going to be out. And it's going to be quite a lot of angry fans over the situation. So then it becomes even more. I mean, I don't think we're done talking about it. I could see a world where Ricky struggles again against Pittsburgh, and it's leading our show Monday again, and Fran Brown's getting asked about it on his Monday press conference again, and this is just going to be an ongoing conversation. But I just don't think anyone out there, unless you're within the program, truly knows how good Luke Carney is. I think it's right to do your research and see what his stats were in high school, and everyone is welcome to form their opinions. And I know some of you probably have seen his high school tape and like his arm, and Fran has said good things about him, but Fran's also said good things about Ricky, and everything about Ricky's high school pedigree is very good as well. I think that's fair. The NIL will play a part, but there's probably a lot of quarterbacks that are getting paid more across the country that have gotten benched. I mean, you got to win football games too. I'd also say this, and I don't know this officially, but my feel is that Ricky Collins is making more money this year than Steve Angeli. And Steve Angeli started over Ricky Collins. So if you're using that theory, if it is true, and that's just speculation or a guess based on how everything went down, that Steve Angeli's not making as much as Ricky. Because I don't think you would pay two guys $1 million at the quarterback position, and they probably had already given Ricky $1 million or whatever the going rate was for a starter, which is what we think. It's close to $1 million. So it didn't stop Fran from picking Steve Angeli if he is making less than Ricky, which that's my assumption.
ESPN 97.7 and 100.1. Watch live on QSportsTalk.com.
Well, they blew up the chicken man in Philly last night. Now they blew
Spent a lot of time talking about a guy who's from the Philly area, Camden, New Jersey, earlier on the show today. Fran Brown, what is he going to do next year? Will it be Kurt Signetti, a Western PA guy that is going to Penn State? Will it be Matt Rule returning home? Is Fran Brown on the list? If you missed any of the conversation today, you can also listen back. You can always listen back to the show. QSportsTalk.com, our podcast feed, ESPN Syracuse /Utica Rome. Get every episode in its entirety, no breaks, on Q Sports Talk on our Twitch stream, also on our podcast feed, also on our YouTube simulcast as well. As we wrap up the show today on Drive Time, couple shout outs. Do want to acknowledge that Justice Ross Simmons, that was more good news from the press conference. JRS, we last saw him come out of the locker room at SMU, and he was on crutches and had a boot on his foot. Fran Brown said he sprained his ankle and he's straight. So we don't know if that definitely means he's playing, but that's good news. I did not think it was a sprained ankle based on crutches and a boot. So really encouraging to hear that Justice Ross Simmons is not dealing with a long-term injury. And we found out that at Fran Brown's Monday press conference earlier today. Also, yesterday was Ken Pom Day. Syracuse basketball gets their preseason ranking. I'm a big Ken Pom follower. I know some of you scoff at these numbers, and it's become increasingly harder to actually project in the transfer portal era what teams are going to finish. Syracuse is ranked 68th in the preseason, the men's basketball team on the Ken Pom computer rankings. They were ranked 68th in the preseason last year. They, of course, did not finish 68th. They finished 115 last year. Year one under Red Autry, they were preseason 105, finished 80, so they exceeded expectations in year one. Of course, they did not exceed expectations last year. Just want to acknowledge that there were some responses to Syracuse's Team 68 on Ken Pom. That means they are Team 68 in the field right now. That means they are starting the year on the bubble. That's not true at all. Ken Pom ranks every team in the country. Keep in mind that there's only 32 at-large bids plus the first 4 games. Really, you have to be a top 40 team in Ken Pom to be feeling good or be on the inside of the bubble. Probably top 45. If you're 45, 46, 47, you're kind of on the bubble. I looked last year. Ohio State was team 37 in the final Ken Pom rankings. They did not make the tournament. So Syracuse being preseason 68, that puts their projected record on Ken Pom at 17-13. That puts them projected 10th in the ACC. I can tell you with 100% certainty right now, if they finish 10th in the ACC, unless they win the ACC tournament, they are not going to the NCAA tournament. So that means that they are considered not even a bubble team right now, if you're going off of Ken Pom's rankings. Bert Torvik has them in the low 60s. Evan Miyakawa has them also, I think, 63. So Syracuse's preseason projections are to not make the tournament, according to those websites, and Ken Pom is projecting the Orange with the exact same preseason ranking they had last year. And it goes without saying, or having to be said, that Syracuse needs to exceed those preseason expectations to feel good about Adrian Autry getting a 4th year at Syracuse. We'll leave you with that today. Thanks to Giovanni Heater for producing. Thanks to all of you for following along on the Q Sports Talk chat or on our YouTube chat as well. And we will talk to you tomorrow, 5 to 6 p.m. for another drive time here on ESPN Radio and QSportsTalk.com.
This is Orange.